Welcome back to Monitors Unboxed. Today we're taking a brief look at the HyperX Armada 27, which is one of the first HyperX branded displays, though technically this isn't a new monitor company, as HyperX has been owned by HP since 2021, and HP have made many displays in the past. I guess HyperX is now to HP what Alienware is to Dell, so more of a premium brand designed for gamers. The Armada 27 is a pretty simple offering. It's a 27-inch 1440p 165Hz IPS monitor with the standard set of features, so adaptive sync support with G-Sync compatible branding, rated 1 millisecond response times, and even display HDR 400 support, though to be clear there is no real HDR hardware here. The main differentiating factor separating the Armada from other monitors is the inclusion of a desk mount instead of a regular stand. Great news for those that were planning on buying a desk mount alongside a new monitor. While it does take some setting up, the included mount is high quality and works really well. You get both a simple clamp for the edge of a desk and accessories for a more permanent fixture if you want to drill in the mount. It's very hefty, everything is made of metal and is really well built, plus when it's all tightened up appropriately, it's very strong and sturdy with no wobble. While I haven't tested many third-party mounts myself, this feels and functions similar to high-quality models that I've used previously. Obviously, the main reason you'd want a mount versus a normal monitor stand is the extreme range of motion that a mount offers. The Armada 27 is capable of being positioned pretty much any way you like, with heaps more height than a normal stand and more degrees of freedom. Plus, it can be very easily repositioned if you want to, say, turn it around or slightly change where you want it. Monitor mounts are awesome, and there's plenty of advantages to having one that are given to you out of the box when you get this monitor. The downside here being the Armada 27 doesn't come with a normal stand. HP are not providing both a mount and a stand, it's mount only. So if your desk doesn't work with a mount for whatever reason, or you'd prefer a stand, there is no point buying this monitor at all. I'm sure you probably could buy a third-party stand if you really wanted to, but I don't see why you would when you could just choose from the abundance of displays that come with a stand. Other aspects to this display design are pretty typical. We get one display port and two HDMI ports, very basic setup here, no other connectivity. The OSD is controlled through a directional toggle and features a standard set of features, but as it doesn't have any USB ports, it can't receive firmware updates and can't support stuff like a KVM switch, which is becoming increasingly popular on these sorts of monitors. For response times, we get 5 modes, and the first mode, level 1, is standard overdrive off-like behavior, a bit slow but no overshoot. Level 2 gives us a small performance increase. Then at level 3 we start seeing a decent experience at 165Hz with around a 6 millisecond average response, minimal overshoot and good cumulative deviation. Level 4 increases overshoot to a noticeable degree, so I wouldn't recommend it, while level 5 has extreme overshoot in the pursuit of 1 millisecond response times, which it does achieve in the best cases, just not in a practical way. For variable refresh rate gaming, level 3 overdrive is also pretty good. At 165Hz we get strong refresh rate compliance and no obvious visual artifacts, which allows for a good experience at 144 and 120Hz as well. Around 100Hz there's a bit more overshoot, but it isn't that noticeable while gaming, and even at 85Hz we're only getting an inverse ghosting rate of 26% with lowish peaks. However, at 60Hz, inverse ghosting is noticeable as these artifacts don't decay very quickly, hence the high level of cumulative deviation for some transitions. At 60Hz, I'd recommend using the level 2 overdrive setting. Due to mediocre performance at 60Hz in the optimal setting, I wouldn't class this monitor as having a single overdrive mode experience, but it's not the worst for variable refresh rate gaming overall. Especially if you'll mostly be playing at around 90Hz and above, the level 3 mode will deliver a great experience. However, variable overdrive would have taken this display to the next level. Compared to other displays, the Armada 27 does an acceptable job at its maximum refresh rate, giving gamers an overshoot-free experience. While it could be pushed a little faster like we see from the LG 27GP850 or Gigabyte M27QP, it's also faster than other options like the HP X27Q and Gigabyte M27Q. In terms of average performance across the refresh range, the Armada 27 performs quite similarly to other 1440p 165Hz IPS monitors that we've tested, which is a good thing. It has a standard response time average in the 5 to 6 millisecond range and typical average inverse ghosting. This is a good balance of performance between speed and overshoot, which shows up in average cumulative deviation, where the Armada is one of the better displays of these specs. With that said, the difference between the Armada and something like the 27 GP850 or MAG274 QRF-QD is pretty small, less than 5% better, which is not noticeable in practice. However, it is a step better than the Gigabyte M27QP and HP X27Q, which are in the budget category for this hardware, so it's good to see it sitting more towards the top of the chart. At a fixed 120Hz and fixed 60Hz, we're very much looking at a mid-table result, which again is fine and shows the balance on offer here. Input lag is also as expected. We're seeing a processing delay of just 0.3 milliseconds, which is fast, though the modest refresh rate by modern standards sees it fall behind some of the faster monitors in the chart like the M27QX. Power consumption is also typical, so it's nothing to be concerned about. The Armada 27 is a wide gamut monitor with typical DCI-P3 coverage of about 96% in our testing. There's no meaningful extension into Adobe RGB, so we're left with around 73% Rec 2020 coverage, which again is a standard result for a 2022 gaming monitor. It's not as wide gamut as something like the MAG274 QRF-QD, but it matches many other monitors. Factory calibration was okay without being a standout. Grayscale performance had average delta E's, though decent adherence to the sRGB gamma curve and okay results for color temperature. The Armada doesn't come with an sRGB mode enabled by default, so there is some oversaturation in the color tests, but there's nothing else funky going on, so errors aren't as severe as we've seen on some other wide gamut displays. Ultimately, compared to other gaming monitors, factory calibration is average to good, which I think is reasonable for this sort of display. What surprised me about the Armada is it has a built-in sRGB mode that doesn't restrict other settings, so gamers can adjust the white balance while retaining the sRGB clamp. It's not obvious that it's the sRGB mode though. HP simply calls this the standard mode in contrast to the default gaming mode. And while this mode doesn't make any major adjustments to grayscale in its default configuration, it's clearly clamping the gamut to sRGB, which reduces oversaturation. As white balance controls remain unlocked, from there we can tweak this mode to produce great hardware calibrated results. It's not perfect of course, as we don't get control over everything, but I ended up with saturation and color checker delta E's below 3, which is much better than average for most wide gamut gaming monitors. From there we can run a full calibration with little issue to resolve the last remaining issues with performance, and the results are quite strong. Maximum brightness is good, coming in at 450 nits, while minimum brightness is average at around 50 nits, though that's very acceptable. The overall contrast ratio is above average for an IPS monitor, coming in at 1200:1, though that's similar to some of its competitors and well below what we've seen from VA monitors. So despite a good IPS showing, I don't think black levels or contrast are a reason to buy this. Viewing angles are good. This is a typical IPS experience in that area. IPS glow wasn't a huge issue on my unit, though this does vary between units. Uniformity was also typical for a gaming monitor, with good performance in the center section, but some fall off around the edges, nothing to be concerned about. Final section of this review is the Hub Essentials checklist, which looks to see if HP are accurately advertising this display and meeting basic minimum performance standards. What's odd about the HyperX website for the Armada 27 is there's no spec page, so many of the usual things you'd get like brightness, contrast, and color gamut aren't listed. However, what is shown are pictures of the display, which appear to exaggerate how slim the bezels are. It's a bit of an odd one here because the main gallery pictures do accurately show what the display looks like, but further down you get shots of the display in real setups that definitely show slimmer than real bezels. Usually this is just a marketing or graphic design error, but it is misleading and should be more accurate to the real product. There's not much to judge HP against for the color section, though it's good to see no limitations on the sRGB mode. The Armada also does well for motion performance in some areas, aside from the usual problems with advertising a 1 millisecond response time, which is misleading. This monitor also does support backlight strobing, but I didn't cover it here in detail as there's a lot of the usual issues with this sort of feature. As for the HDR section, this is a fake HDR monitor which doesn't deliver better than SDR levels of contrast due to its terrible, ineffective dimming system. Unfortunately, I also observed some flickering with the Armada at low refresh rates, particularly when testing around 60 Hz in a variable refresh rate. It's not very obvious, and I was only able to spot it with certain shades of grey, but ideally it would be rock solid and consistent all of the time, so we have penalized it here. After testing the HyperX Armada 27, there's nothing overly special about this product that stands out, aside from, well, the stand. Including a desk mount instead of a traditional stand may be of benefit to some buyers that were going to buy one anyway, and it's a pretty good quality inclusion. It does limit the target market though, as there's no normal stand included, so HP are really going after one specific type of buyer. If you don't want a desk mount, there's no point considering this display at all. As for performance, the Armada isn't a standout. This is very much the 1440p 165Hz IPS gaming experience we've seen over the last few years. The panel here is delivering performance more towards the high end of the range for those specs, particularly for response times, but this sort of experience is also available from many other monitors. I did like the inclusion of an sRGB mode without limitations, but wasn't as keen on the lack of a single overdrive mode experience and some minor flickering concerns in specific test situations. While it may have been possible to recommend the Armada 27 in some situations based on its performance and unique stand, that's made very difficult due to its ludicrous price tag. This monitor has an MSRP of $500 US, which is absolutely crazy, and today it's available for a slight discount of $480 US. That is well above high-end pricing for a 1440p 165Hz display in 2022, putting it into competition with other types of displays. For example, today's budget monitors of these specs, like the HP X27Q and Gigabyte M27QP, are under $300 US. The Armada 27 does outperform those options in some areas, but not to the tune of $180+ better. Then for higher end options, we have stuff like the 27GP850 available for around $350 to $400 US, which again is simply a much better option. Even if you specifically wanted the desk mount, those are available from third parties for $50 to $100, and that'll typically get you something pretty high quality. It becomes very hard to justify the price of the Armada when you could add a desk mount on to a really good quality alternative monitor and still end up saving money. To make matters worse, I wouldn't even bother buying a 1440p 165Hz monitor for $400, let alone $480 when the Gigabyte M27QX exists at $400 US. These days, the Armada 27 has to compete with a 1440p 240Hz product, which is available at a lower price, or a similar price if you buy it and then add on a third-party mount. It's basically impossible to recommend right now because of this. So the conclusion I have to draw here is that the Armada 27 is a bit of a fail, mostly due to its price. The main selling point here being the desk mount hasn't done enough to justify its very high price tag, and ultimately I think buyers will be better off grabbing a third-party mount for a better product like the M27QX. The absolute maximum I think HP can charge for this in the current market is $380. It has to be lower than the M27QX, and tempting value for those looking at, say, getting a good quality 1440p 165Hz display plus a third-party mount. With the pricing as it is right now, it just doesn't make sense for most buyers. Anyway, that's it for this one. If you do support our independent testing and want to support the channel directly, we have links to our Patreon and Floatplane accounts. Those will be in the description below, where you can sign up and gain access to things like our Discord community if you want to ask me questions about monitors and just chat with all the enthusiasts in there. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.